Okay, so I think the quickest and easiest way for me to share what I'm doing with you all this summer is to just kind of talk about my goals sheet. And so some of the competency areas I'm focusing most on are assessment, evaluation, and research, and social justice and inclusion, because mostly what I'm doing is program development for an Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So the number one thing I'm working on right now is LGBTQ plus resource development, including a peer mentorship program, a safe zone training program, a facilitator training program for that safe zone piece, as well as some awareness month materials and some resources for students of color. I'm also working on developing resources for women, and I already have done some assessment and research around benchmark institutions and what they're doing for diversity and inclusion. I will also be developing some recommendations for some models around general training programs that include Safe Zone and other areas such as disability, race, sex, class, etc. I will also be developing some models for helping white students develop cultural competencies in areas of race. Finally, I wanted to talk to you all about some of the things I'm learning, especially the theory. So we start with Schlossberg's Marginality and Mattering, which is imperative to the mission of Bradley's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, which rather than necessarily framing their services as based on student support, they talk directly about retention and how supporting students is related to retention. And so I think it's just important to consider that Schlossberg is kind of my basis for this year. Also learn about queer theory and using it to look at college student identity development. We often use kind of constructivist narratives to look at how college students fit into external environments. But when using queer theory, we find that students are often changing their external environment to fit their internal understandings of who they are. So they're manipulating definitions of gender and sexuality and religion to fit who they are instead of changing themselves to fit into those categories. And so it's just a different way of looking at self-authorship. And I'm really conscious of using queer theory more often as a basis for my work, especially when I am doing queer program development. So some other things I'm learning specifically around the mentorship program and Safe Zone, because those are two things I'm looking at right now, include about how important queer mentorship can be, how mentorship in general is really useful for both mentors and mentees, and that relationships across culture can be even more beneficial. And these are all things that I have experienced with my work in NASPA's NUF program. But I also was thinking about how reflection is important to build into a mentorship relationship, and that really supports some of my experiences with my theoretical background in service learning, which really prioritizes reflection. I also learned a lot about the importance of assessment, and I kind of already knew these things, but in general, just thinking about how assessment is important and how we need to continue using assessment to strengthen our programming, which is relevant also to Safe Zone, which I found that kind of has very little assessment. But what I did see was that there are some components that we often highlight in Safe Zone training, such as terminology and kind of how to react to students who are coming out, but we don't teach people how to confront systems that are oppressive to LGBTQ plus students. So that's something that I'm really focusing on developing into the Safe Zone program. And also just that like Safe Zone works. And that's really important because I've only found a couple of sources that are really citing that. There are no sources that are saying it doesn't work at all. And so I think we need to continue to assess these programs because they're incredibly popular on college campuses, but we have to keep asking ourselves, is this the best way to create this environment that Schlossberg kind of talks about? So that's some of the stuff I'm learning.